This quote by Perrin, I have to say, has been a motivational inspiration for me over the last couple of decades as I've been involved with not only New Horizons, but during the midst of the documentation for this mission, I was also involved with the last servicing mission for the Hubble Space Telescope, which obviously serviced a lot of this mission. And on that mission, I was involved in human spaceflight, but always came back to New Horizons and had that sense of robotic spaceflight and the team. And I had two different cultures to work with. But that idea of looking up at the stars, imagination, has been a very big drive for me, and I think probably for most of you. But it's also about imagination is one thing. There's also serendipity. So I'm going to give you a prologue before I start. We all know that Clyde, oh, sure, actually, it starts like this. The two Clydes, James and a Tom. So no pictures yet, but there's serendipity here and why we're all here. So we all know that Clyde Tombaugh, what he did in discovering Pluto in 1930, but something else happened. 16 years later, in 1946, there was a Clyde Holliday. Who was Clyde Holliday? Clyde Holliday worked for the Applied Physics Lab. What did he do? He played around with a motion picture camera to put into the nose cone of a V-2 rocket, among many that had been acquired as a result at the end of World War II, along with von Braun and the rocket team. From New Mexico, they launched a number of V2s, and as a result of his work, we saw the first images of Earth, 1946. 12 years later, James Van Allen, that's the James, at the time in 1946, was a scientist at the Applied Physics Lab. And his initial experiments in that nose cone led to Geiger counters, the idea of radiation, that led to Explorer 1, and he ended up at the University of Iowa. 3 or 4 years later, there was the Tom, and that was Tom Kermidges, who was one of his students at Iowa. And the rest is history. So he went from that, starting here at the Applied Physics Lab, to what you guys did here. So there was the prologue. I'm Michael Soluri, and as Ellen said, I've been documenting all of you and this mission since 2005. The reason I pursued that is because basically we all grew up seeing the pictures in Life magazine, the networks, what have you, rockets going up, end results. I always felt, who are the people that did it? Who are the scientists? They didn't get photographed. They weren't documented. Yes, there was a shot of James Van Allen and von Braun and the guy from JPL holding up Explorer 1. We remember that. But where's everybody else in that big arc? And I kind of felt like this needed to be done. Was it difficult to convince magazines? Yes, yeah, because it was more easy to do big illustrations, show the net results, show the rocket going up and stuff like that. I was more interested in the people. You know, who were the scientists? Where did they work? How did they work? What locations did they work? What was it like being in something like this? So that was the motivation. And so now we begin. Time and distance is that theme, picking up off the Perrin quote. So this is a huge abbreviation of the work. And it all began with, of course, Clyde pointing the way. And it began with what I understood to be the Pluto underground. Now, why that isn't the photograph from 1958, or 1988 or so, when you started this thing, but this was done about 5 days before launch. And I thought someday we'll sort of work that in, but that's the Pluto underground. This is the beginning of that. I think there might be a few other people missing, but this is a dinner, and I was getting used to figuring out what are their names. So it began here at Goddard of the spacecraft, and the labor force behind doing a lot of that. The images, this, what I didn't get to, this was actually done, this is the backup mirror for Lori. Everything I'm showing is the backup. And thanks to Glenn and to Hal, I was able to go into some obscure building here at APL, and they took out the actual backups to the Lori instrument. And I wanted to make portraits of them in some way that captured that sense of what their destiny is going to be. And the shell, the thing that Andy worked on, this is actually the imaging mechanism. And of course, Lori, this is about a month and a half before it was shipped to the Cape. One of the workers, Tom, we don't look great in jumpsuits, but and playing around with looking at the spacecraft as a piece of sculpture. I got that idea. These are pieces of sculpture. They're one of a kind. And the wiring, sense of scale of the spacecraft with the folks. Then I was with Mike Buckley, I guess, and he said, well, if you want to stay around, they're going to do a spin test. What's a spin test? He said, well, it's going to go round and round. I thought, oh, well, that was like maybe shot 5 or 10. The one that actually became famous was this one. And this picture ran on the New York Times 5 days after flyby in terms of explaining the mission. I think Andy Chang wrote the story. And that to me sort of captured, this is at the Cape about a month later with some of the engineering team. I'm not sure Glenn's in there, but that was a spacecraft before it was going to be put and stacked. So here we are at the Cape. First meeting, the idea of the stamp, Alan, Tom again. You can see a few people recognized there. And some of the original group. This is a couple of days before launch. When I met Clyde's wife, Patsy, I was trying to connect with her and I said, well, where's Pluto? And that's what she did. So on the day of launch, I was struck by a number of things. I'd gone through a number of issues. And I kept on thinking, well, this robot, this machine's going to leave water world Earth and go to something that we don't know what it looks like. I have no idea. But I was fascinated with the fact that that on that morning, on the ocean there at Port Canaveral, where I took that this was destined for something that was beyond a water world. My sequence for pictures were not the NASA pictures. I had a remote camera set up, about 300 feet wide angle lens from the launch pad, and it worked. The weird thing is that I had to leave to go back to New York, and a close friend of mine who also had a remote camera out there retrieved the film. I had no idea whether or not it worked or not. And by the time I got back to New York, I just saw New Horizons past the moon. And that 9 hours between that and getting back to the city. So I experienced the entire launch by the Banana River. I wanted to be with regular people. I mean, I'm grateful for all the experiences I've had at the press site, but I wanted to be with folks. And I kept on thinking, well, it's leaving Waterworld. And there was just that unusual look of seeing your probe leave Earth for that. But then that set up another situation, how to use that picture and create a sense of time. So I grabbed Alan, total frenzy, because the rocket had gotten off okay, and I gave him the picture. I said, we're going to match that 9.5 years later with whatever happens and see if we can make that happen. Would it? So now began the documentation. I took the same picture, met Alice about 7 weeks after launch, met her and the team. She showed me the card that Alan had sent with the flowers, which I think was wonderful. You know, sort of read that for yourself. And see you soon and enjoy the drive. Following year in Flagstaff was the team meeting, and it was my first time to Flagstaff. And there again, another Hubble picture of Pluto, just some sense of anchoring this in time and space. Clyde again pointing the way. The telescope, of course, that he used. A year later was my really first encounter with all of you and Leslie. This is April 2008, here at APL. There weren't more about maybe 10 of you at that point, figuring out what I understood to be the flyby zone, the trajectory, I guess, that the probe would fly. So that's what this looked like. TCM, a couple years later, this is I'm seeing Alice Beck in the operations center. That sort of expresses it all. I don't know when Mike's here or not, but that's. The meeting in Boulder was a turning point for me in terms of seeing and experiencing the team in something outside of APL, and seeing Alan's hometown. And this is where basically it got very real, certainly for me, and I imagine for a lot of you, over the issue, are there hazards out there, and Shabbat, and that. But there are moments like that. But also, the idea of the cake sort of came around. I thought, you know what? There's got to be something about the writing. And I decided I needed to address, going back to the central issue, what do scientists do? What do they think? What do they feel? What do they imagine? So I started doing a series of portraits with some of you, getting an artist pad and white chalk and writing. And these are some of the things. I think you could pretty much read these. And it captures this moment in 2012. So we're, what, about 4.5 years away. 3.5 years, sorry. I still can't figure out what Mark was trying to do, but I asked him, and yeah. This is good. The more drawing, the better. Ralph emphasizing that, of course, important. And then Fran. So scientists can draw, right? So and then of course with Alan. Crossing Neptune's orbit. So that was another interesting experience. This took place at NASA headquarters, and I was going to be able to meet Ed Stone from Voyager. So, like many of you, Voyager certainly captured my imagination and thought. I know Andy was a part of that. And I thought, wow, and the idea was passing the banner. So that was my portrait of Ed. And I just said, what's this all about? And he said, it's great to pass the baton to Ed. And he did. Then I did head to the portrait together. Again, he's holding pictures of Neptune, last Voyager picture, and then the Hubble picture of Pluto. Again, what's going to happen? What are we going to see? And again, that blue dot. So I'm being a little more ethereal. It goes back to the Star Things with Parents quote that this is 3.7 billion miles out, and the encounter is going to be around 3 billion. You know, I kept on thinking, without getting overly into Sagan, but that just simply mesmerizes me in thinking about what you guys, all of you, were about to undertake and do from that. So this was going to be a big deal, the wake up. I remember it was a very rainy night. It took me 5 hours to get from New York. That's a whole other story. And this is sort of what transpired on that evening, in the tension, you know, of turning New Horizons back on. And of course, the toast, because it worked, of course. Remember that picture? Because a couple of years, we're going to see another variation of that. Then Alice and I connected on coffee. So I figured this is definitely something very important to the behavioral issues of being a scientist or an artist, I must say. And she made it very clear. So this became the running joke. Then finally the time came, 2015 arrived. A sense of time and distance, and it went from this place, and now we begin the encounter. And it started with this is the 6th of July. So this is a couple of days after the incident. So again, the cake ceremony, the humor, the hazards. And then I started doing portraits of a lot of the senior people that actually were behind some of this engineering on New Horizons from the Applied Physics Lab. So Andy, of course, with Lori. The 7th of July was going to be a big day. I guess that's the way it was coming in with Chris. And everybody was waiting. Did we get it? Did everything upload fine? So I'll show you the sequence. And we got it. This is my preview for what was going to happen on the flyby day. So meanwhile, up in the geology area, just sort of a little snapshot of New Horizons back in business, image, just capturing these little moments, the humor with the Pluto water, this might have been Hal's thing, right? Got to put that in. Will. Meetings that were held in some obscure building back here somewhere involved the final, and these are the folks from, what was the firm called? Kinetics, yeah. And that was fascinating to be in on that. The language, you could really feel how real those impending days were over, the small window the spacecraft would be coming in and talking about this. And just the little doodles and things, these fascinating, anything that would, and then Yangping, he figured out most of it on a book. And it had kind of a Star Trek-y feel to it, Yes, Star Trek enters into this, that picture got circulated a lot. Will, you're very expressive. I'm grateful for photographer's dream, just like Ralph. I can only imagine what it's like being in your classroom. But it's little stuff like this. I just was fascinated how to detail that, things on the wall, anything that kind of documents the sense of time. Mark. Yes, even that. Famous shot, right? Did that on. Then it came to the Magic School Bus. Michael, why are you introducing the Magic School Bus? Yes, my son was 6 years old when New Horizons launched, but at the hotel where we were staying, there was a suite in Columbia, that hotel. And a lot of the postdocs that were new to the mission were up there having drinks and stuff. And they were playing this version of the Magic School Bus going to Pluto. And I thought, that's fascinating. I didn't make a picture of it because how do you capture that? And the light was kind of low and everybody's been drinking. But there's something about the school bus and maybe the message behind that from all of you that remember growing up with that or had kids who saw that. So I'm setting up something, but you're gonna have to wait and see where the payoff is. So here we go. We're getting close. 22 hours, 48 minutes. And so this sort of became Alice's show through portrait. There we go. And then this one, totally by accident. Sometimes that thing of serendipity that I spoke about, I was making a picture after everything was sort of ending on my cell phone to send to my son, waiting, of course, for the embargo, but I made the picture. So I've got the cell phone, got my camera over here. I'm looking up and going, there's the photograph. Phone goes back in, and this became part of the sequence that's been well used. You know, then we go to the countdown here at Kasi. Message from Obama. But then there was one other thing that I figured had to be mentioned, and that was Mariner 4, right? 50 years before, same day. And so imagine to go from that to what was coming down, or was going to be coming down from the spacecraft. That's pretty remarkable. So this is great. It was me and Bill Engels from NASA headquarters and the APL guys there in the analysis area. Just waiting. I put my phone up to sort of mark the time. And tension was there. It looked like it was going to come through. And I figured I wanted to show you the still frames from the NASA video. And of course, I'm blending, but I'm back there. So I'll just show you. And then got that. So we come full circle. Right? Go from this, and you guys pulled this off. Just beautiful. So here are the post-encounter days as images and data were coming in. I just wished I'd had a poet with me to write, because there's just so many, the language I was hearing was beyond my ability to go beyond just simply capturing moments. But I wish there was a poet there to capture your language, you know, just that, and make sense of it all. Not make sense of it, transcribe it, you know, translate it into something meaningful, because it was like haiku after haiku, and it was magnificent. Yeah, that was a great one. Everything, all the lights went down. And there's Brian May that showed up. So he visited the geology group, and Paul had his Lego thing, which was great. And I thought this is interesting. There's nothing more exciting in the world of exploration than going to a place about which you know nothing. And so he sat in, and some of you remember some of that. Yeah. And there's the portrait. I figured, well, hold up the computers. Right? haikus, it's just. Yeah, you like that one? This was a very dramatic group, I have to say. This was, I, of- I mean, each one I would go to visit, this one was like, okay, this. Of course, Indy, couldn't have done it without you, right? Well, then it came to that shot I made of Alan Beck 2 hours after launch, January 19th, 2006. And of course, we had to do that. So that sort of made took 9.5 years, but light pointing the way, and we had all the media. And then, of course, the group shot. And then to me, it's not only the science that I'm learning from all of you, but also to me, just the unbelievable beauty of this as an image. And the results, of course, lots of results. Oh, and there was that. Maldives, they decided to do this. But it was interesting. I'm going to close with this. So Brian May also quoted this. One of the biggest boundaries that we all struggle with is the dichotomy between art and science. I don't think it's a dichotomy. I don't think it's a dichotomy at all. The notions of explore, discover, hope, risk, gain, loss, more no's than yeses, the unpredictable, sleep deprivation, enough behavioral issues that there should be something in the DSM for psychologists. 29.6 deprivation, can't get to prediction, stuff like this. Humor, and of course, coffee. And I think that actually there's not much, you guys do what you do, I do, but we share kind of the same kind of like approaches behaviorally and visually and emotionally. And so I have to, in a way, disagree with Brian on that, because going back to Miss Frizzle and the Magic School Bus, she did say, chances make mistakes.
Wow. Well, that was really fantastic. There is time for questions or comments. Leslie?
So, on the science team, I am only here to serve.
Huh?
You asked for a haiku, and this is what we got a week and a half ago.
Okay.
Mihai Haranyi. Mountains made of ice, frozen plains and shadowed moons, secrets in the dark.
Oh, I love that. Who wrote that?
Mihai Haranyi, on the student desk counter.
Magnificent. Oh, I'd love to get a copy of that. That's great. Casey?
I can't say, Alan already said it, but thank you for that wonderful, that archiving, that history, the memories. It's just wonderful to see.
Thank you.
A small quibble.
Yeah.
Maybe my memory is going bad, but I'm pretty sure we didn't look at the first high resolution image of Pluto until the day after the encounter, because it hadn't come down yet. I remember getting up very early at 5 a.m. to see that. So
Right.
You might want to change the date to the 15th.
The image that I showed after is more for illustration. Show that arc of between, then and now. I think that on the morning of the reveal,
Yes.
the pointing, that was on the
That's
morning.
the 15th.
Yeah, that's like at 6:45 in the morning.
Well,
You're in that
14th,
picture.
It could have been on the 14th.
Absolutely. Right? Kelsey was there. All of you were there. Yeah.
It had to be on the day after, right?
Nope. No, that was the morning.
Oh, it was a pre-encounter? Okay, pardon me then.
That was the last full frame.
6:45.
The quick shot down in case it was a
apologies.
bad day at Pluto.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was very early. I remember being.
Because 6 o'clock we had to show up and went through that. This is 6:45, 6:50.
It was very early. The other thing
Yes.
I'd like to say is that your very first quote, if you could put it back up,
Yeah.
I'm going to connect you and Alan and water worlds, if you don't mind. I've often thought what it would be like, and Alan wrote a paper about this, and arguing that it could be many water worlds and many intelligent civilizations. Imagine you're an intelligent civilization, you're growing up in a water world under an ice shell, and you never see the stars.
Hmm.
What would your civilization be like if you have no idea about the outside universe? Yes. But that may very well be a lot of intelligent races don't get to see the sky like we do. Just a thought.
Yeah. Working.
About the question of dichotomy, I mean, the way I look at it is we're both artists and scientists, you know, endeavoring to capture and convey something that is true. And, you know, for me, I don't see that much of a distinction, you know, and that's why we are all kind of tied at the hip in that way. So, yeah.
Coffee helps. Well, that's the morning. I'm not talking about what IPA or wine you're gonna have later in the day, but that's.
A question to the right here, over here.
Derek,
Derek from Kinetics. Can you discuss how you landed on the high contrast black and white aesthetic?
You know, that's a really good question. I photographed most of this. I began shooting this in film. Sorry, I began shooting this on film, and then as the technology evolved in the early years over to digital capture, and the lighting in a majority of the places that I would work, where this team was in meetings, was horrendous. And then it became to me, okay, I'm capturing this. That I'm looking more at the motion, the gestures. But my roots are in black and white. I mean, my roots as a photographer began learning the craft of black and white. My sensibility to light, measuring light, calibrating light, using camera film, etc. And as I started making experiments after the 2012 meeting at Boulder, it became very clear to me that these simply became more alive and were more abstract because the mission was abstract to begin with. Not getting overly intellectual, but it seemed to me that it was about imagination. The color became irrelevant. The focus was the people and the moments in time. So black and white to me transcended that. It gave that feeling. And going through it, so technically there are, in Lightroom, there's algorithms that will take the RGB and take all the different colors and take them into various levels of gray. So then I can choose the film analogy on its curve. So it could be a Kodak or Delta or Ilford or Agfa and give me the level of black and white. And that's really how, to me, the mission looked at it. It really was, it needs to stay in that abstraction. Okay. Hey.
yes, two more questions.
Caleb Guimar, University of Texas, San Antonio Southwest Research Institute. On the note about the black and white and using the film in the low lighting conditions, did you use Kodak P3200 in a lot of those earlier shots or?
No.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Okay. No. It was, at the Cape, it was all color negative film.
Okay.
The launch sequence was, I think, Tri-X.
Okay.
And then after that, I transitioned out of the film. The last film I used was a picture of Alice in the operations center. And that was color negative Kodak portrait or something. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Sure. You doing all right on time?
Mike, a practical question. In my den, I have a globe of Pluto. I have some books about Pluto. I have a coffee table. I have no coffee table book about Pluto and your photographs. And I would love to have something big and fat that I could stick on that table and put it at a diagonal and say, oh yeah, have a look at this.
I have a deal for you. Such a deal I have for you. No. We tried. Alan and I actually came together 2019, early 2020, and came up with a concept called Terra Incognita, and went through a design process a family friend of ours had been the editor-in-chief of Viking Penguin, opened up a lot of doors. The pandemic hit, and basically by that time, and I'm sure Andy could attest to some of this, the interest in this kind of subject matter just was not there. But what I'm going to do, and I've talked with this with Alan and Mike, this presentation, or the one that was either the backdrop there in the dining area, is a PDF with high resolution imagery. And I'm going to arrange to have that. I'll send it to Cindy, and she'll send it to every single one of you, everybody on the team. So basically, you have that. I mean, I wish, but the big thing is that when it comes, for example, the art books, most of you had written your things on that. So, you know, my goal is to have that end up, hopefully, talk to Mike here, at Air and Space. I mean, my work on the Hubble mission is in Air and Space, but I think when it comes to the humanity, that in terms of is not there. And I would like to have something to at least give for posterity, because look, I told my son, because he asked, my son now is 25, naval intelligence officer, and he called me last night and he said, well, how's it going? I said, well, tomorrow's the day presentation. I'm thinking what he's seen only in his lifetime now. Imagine what he's going to see ahead. I doubt another Pluto mission. I don't think that's likely. But between him and, you know, I just became a grandfather with my granddaughter is 14 months. Alan became grandfather. You know, what those kids are going to see as this century moves on is going to be astounding, something wonderful. Or as maybe David Bowman said in 2001, my God, there's stars.